In this video, we're going to be looking at some heavy iron in action, geeking out on metal cutting, and we're going to be pulling out the high-speed camera and checking out some slow-motion milling footage. There's going to be some big changes here in the shop, and it's going to entail this 1944 Kearny Trecker. So what is a Kearny Trecker? Is it the latest TikTok dance craze? Or is it the newest trending shoe?
Yeezy was good.
Any other guesses?
A brand new car.
As nice as those sound, a Kearny Trecker is a machine manufacturer started in 1898 by Edward Kearny and Theodore Trecker. They began in a small shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and quickly grew to become the United States' top milling machine manufacturer. So what exactly is a milling machine? Well, it's a tool that can cut material by spinning a sharp cutter. The material gets attached to the table, then gets pushed into the cutter with a left, right, or up and down motion.
It has long been the dream of the metalworking industry to mill, drill, bore, ream, and tap in one setup on a single machine.
They even had the biggest manufacturing plant in the world at the time. With Kearny Trecker's large manufacturing capabilities, they were essential in making thousands of American warplanes during World War II. Over the next few decades, the company was sold over and over again, and permanently closing its doors in 1993. And some speculate it's due to the company not evolving into the CNC machine world fast enough. This was my very first large milling machine. Bought sight unseen, the price is right. I think I paid like $1,300 for it. And for something that weighs 10,000 pounds, that's a little money for a lot of pounds. And at the time, I really just needed something to hog some material off. So as time goes by, my expectations are exceeding the machine capabilities. It's just not accurate enough for me anymore. So it's time to make some changes with this beast. The first problem with this machine is that the ways are wore out. So you're probably asking yourself, what is a way? Well, they are a smooth, precise track that the machine carriage moves on. When the ways get loose and sloppy, that just translates into your parts that you're trying to cut. The second problem is that the gearbox in this machine has some problems. We have some sheared off teeth or some other weird conditions going on inside the gearbox. They're going to need some further investigation. And lastly, this machine is missing a component, and it's called the parking attachment. And it's what holds on to the vertical milling head that allows you to put the head into place and then to store it when you're not using it. Unfortunately, it's missing on this machine. So let me show you on the machine what these problems look like. Okay, let's turn this machine on and let me show you how tight it gets when it gets to the end of the travel. So we're in the middle. This is pretty expected. Now it's getting easier, much easier. Now it's getting tougher. Now I'm two-handing it to get it to turn, and I still have a foot to go, and now it's so tight, it just almost doesn't want to move anymore. And this is the best compromise that I could find with setting the gib to where in the center I have as least amount of slop. So what exactly is happening here? The metal-to-metal surfaces have been worn away, creating slop. This is bad for making precision parts. So in order to take all the slop out of the machine, it has a tapered wedge called a gib, that when pushed into the machine, it removes all of the slop in the way. While this solves one problem, it also creates another, and that is that the center of the table generally gets the most use, or wear. The ends of the table get used the least, so when you adjust the gib for the center, it gets too tight on the ends. Other problems, we're missing a few gear selections. Either there's a pin sheared in there, a keyway, maybe the teeth are just literally destroyed and they're sitting in the bottom of the crankcase. I don't know. It's gonna need some further investigations, but let me show you what happens. So we're at 247 RPM right now. We're gonna turn the handle on. The spindle turns, 302. That gear works. 365, nothing. You can hear it trying to go. 445, that one works. 545, that one's good. 815, that one's good. And I think 1000 does not work. Nope. So there's 3 or 4 speeds that just do not work anymore. So things that I don't like about it is this. Every time I want to switch to a vertical head, you gotta lift this thing up. It's just a pain to get this thing installed on and off and go back and forth from horizontal milling to vertical milling. But when it's on, it's amazing. Super rigid, accurate. Once it stays on, I leave it on for a long time. The good thing is though that I have it. They're quite expensive to come across. I have the gear that drives it So I have all the components for this machine, which is kind of nice. So I hate to scrap it. So let's talk about some pros and cons of this machine. This is a 50 taper machine, which means it uses a gigantic tool holder, just like this one. Super strong, super rigid. This is the strongest tool holder you can get besides a 60 taper. Find them all over the place. They're dirt cheap. It has controls on the back so that as you're running the horizontal spindle, you can move the table forward and backwards, left to right, rapid traverse, all from looking from the back side of the machine. The machine weighs 10,000 pounds, so it's really rigid, really heavy. I can take almost as big a cut as I want to with it. It has 10 horsepower, more power than what I need, and I like having extra. Since this machine is no longer accurate, I'm gonna have to decide what I'm gonna do with it. The first idea is that I'd like to convert it into a dedicated tubing notcher, since tube notching really doesn't require a high level of accuracy. The downside to this is that it's gonna take up a lot of room, and I'd probably only do some tube notching about a dozen times a year. The second idea is to do a full restoration and bring this baby back to original specifications. This is gonna take a lot of time, you're gonna have to have some specialty tools, and it's gonna take a lot of money. The third option is to part this machine out, donate its components, parts, and pieces to other machines of need to help them stay running and operational. And the last option is to scrap this machine, melting down all its parts and pieces, and turning it into a Kia. Until I can decide on what to do with the Kearny Trecker, I need something to replace it. So this is what's replacing the Kearny Trecker. The Shizuoka milling machine is named from the city in Japan for where it was made. It started in 1877 as Mochizuki Iron Works. In 1936, it became the company we know as an outstanding milling machine manufacturer. They've made all kinds of different milling machines, from horizontal mills, vertical mills, and even combining both together. Their tables could pivot, their heads could swivel, and there's so many choices to fit whatever needs you're after. The superb build quality of the machines make even the old ones valuable and useful, and it's pretty cool that the company still remains in operation today. If you haven't seen one of these machines before, you're not alone, because neither did I up until a few years ago, but what caught my attention was this horizontal milling attachment in a knee-style form. Not only does it have a vertical mill, you can horizontal mill at the same time. There's no head to replace, put the tool in one or the other and go milling. And that was really appealing to me. But then I started to dive a little bit deeper on some of the other features that this machine had, and I started to fall in love with it. First thing that I noticed, all handles are pointed straight at me. So the X-axis, normally the handle's on the end, and you have to reach around and turn the handle. This one is right in front of you, and so is this one. So you can run the X and the Y at a comfortable position. Wish all machines were like this. The knee's the same way. You take the handle and you put it in here, and you operate the knee to go up and down. It has a safety switch, because this has power feeds on every axis. X, Y, and Z. And the safety switch here won't allow the Z to operate when the handle's in, because you know right where that's gonna hit you. This is the gearbox to change the feeds and speeds. You have a high speed, low speed, and you change the high and low with this knob right here. So you pull it out for high, push it in for low. To turn all the power feeds on, you just hit start, moves the Z up and down. And then in order to have power feeds, we need to turn the motor on the side. You can hear that motor running in the back. And now we got power. Table's moving to the right, table's moving to the left. And then if we want to go high speed, pull out. That's so nice. And then if we want to go in and out with the Y, and then if we want to move fast in a direction, we just pull up on this. Want to go fast to the left, fast to the right. And then if we want to turn the spindles on, this works like a normal Bridgeport. We got 1 speed, 2 speed. This is the clutch, so I can brake it. And then when I push it, it turns back on again. This is gonna be great for power tapping. This has a one-shot oiler on the side, so the whole machine gets oiled just by doing that. The Kearny Trecker definitely doesn't have this. So let's turn on the horizontal spindle, and we can do that right here. This has a 5 horsepower horizontal spindle, and if we want to change speeds, we do it on the side of the machine. So we're at 520, 265. Runs pretty smooth. We'll do a sneak peek inside. So you're probably wondering, what does a machine like this cost? Between $6,000 and $12,000, depending on their condition, in a used form. New, I think these things are like 25, 30 grand. There's a metal cover. And we have our 5 horsepower motor, direct driving, a gearbox, which then turns the spindle. It's got a coolant pump. The casting looks fantastic. Nice, thick, heavy duty. This machine weighs 4,000 pounds, which is almost double what a Bridgeport is, but takes up the same amount of space. Moving on up to the head or the top of the machine. This machine's pretty cool because of the horizontal spindle, but what we can utilize is the back half of this. So by loosening these nuts, we can pivot this thing around. So with the head turned to the side, we have full access to the horizontal spindle. I can put anything I want on the table, but then if we keep going around with the head, let me show you what will happen. Drive the ram back, then we can put this on, and voila, we got a horizontal milling machine all in one. Now that is just plain cool. And this uses these bad boys. These are the horizontal milling arbors, which you can run some more tools off of, and it looks like this. So you can put cutters like this onto this shaft.
Let me show you how a feature like this can be used. Let's pretend we want to make a T-nut for a milling table. You'd probably start off with a whole bunch of pieces of bar stock or a big piece of plate steel. You'd hold down that material to the table. Then you'd add multiple cutters to the shaft, depending on how many parts you were cutting, and then space them equally with the shims. Once everything was installed on the shaft, you were ready to make a cut. You'd make one pass across the material, cutting all the T-nuts all at the same time. Once the cut was done, you're ready to take it out of the fixture and slice them all up like a loaf of bread, revealing your parts.
So this is a protective cover. So in order to get the horizontal to work, slide this bad boy in there, here like that. So it goes wherever I want. Voila! Now I can drive things off of this shaft. I would actually use this more often now that it's easier to set up. Let's go back to the way it was. And there we go. That is so cool. Love that. Because it's really small footprint, it's not too tall, not too short, runs a 40 taper spindle, which is much stronger than R8. Let me show you all of them together so you get a good comparison. This is the collet or the holder that holds the end mill in a Bridgeport or small knee mill. And what you're really looking at is this taper right here. That's what holds on to the tool inside. This has a 40 taper, much bigger, much stronger, not too heavy, not too light, and you put the tool inside the end. This is the 50 taper. This is what the big Cincinnati and the K&T use, but for strength, yes, 50 taper is always going to be better. Let's talk about the travel. So this has 32 inches of X travel. It's only like 12, 14 inches of Y travel. The Y isn't so much, but the X is a lot longer. A Bridgeport says it will do 32 inches. But let me show you something. Let me take you over to the Acer and show you a problem with the specs these machines claim they can do, but really can't. They claim that this machine will do 32 inches of X travel on the table, but I don't know how they come up with this number, and let me show you why. So if I move the table all the way to one end, watch what happens to the end of the table over there. Somewhere in here, something's gonna hit. Boom, I hit. So the table cannot come over anymore. Now if we measure the table sticking out on this side, basically we're at 24 inches. So I can only go over 24 inches. I think they're thinking if you take the handle and everything off that maybe you can get more travel than that. Who's gonna take the handle off? I'm not. Now let's go measure the horizontal machine. So because they have removed the handles from the end, this table can now over travel on the carriage. So let me show you. Okay, so this is where the table stopped on the Acer machine, but because there's no handle here, I can keep going. Basically stopping somewhere in there. So that's the end of the table, almost in the center of the machine.
So it's a 30-inch travel versus 24. So you get 6 inches more travel length with the same size table. There was one thing I was worried about was the scales on the machine. I thought this was gonna be a metric machine. I was a little worried about it, but it's not. This whole machine is imperial. So we got down to 1/1000th of an inch on the Z, 1/1000th of an inch on the Y, and 1/1000th of an inch on the X. I'm sure you could get this machine in metric if you wanted to, but obviously it was ordered for somebody here in the States. This machine does not have a nod feature where the head can tilt forward or backwards. It can only rotate left or right, which I'm okay with. I rarely need the nod, and I have a machine that can do it. So if I need it, I still have that capability. Another negative that I can find is that because this machine is old, I'm missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 knobs, which we'll have to spend an afternoon turning on the lathe. This only has a 2 horsepower motor on the top, but it has belts that you have to jump and change for the speeds and feeds. I could easily attach a VFD so that I could change the speeds and have an infinite range, but I'm gonna try it like it is for now and see how I like it. So are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? 2 spindles, 2 independent power sources. I think we should try cutting something at the same time with both spindles. That ought to be interesting. Let's try it. So let's see if we can machine the top and the side at the same time. This is just a piece of stock. I have no idea why anybody would want to do this at the same time, but we are going to do it anyway. So in order for this to work, I can't have this cutter in line with this one. I'm going to have to turn it off to the side a little bit so they don't interfere, so I can get that perfect corner. So let's pivot the head and get them offset a little bit. So we got a perfect 90-degree corner looking right through here, but none of the cutters will hit themselves. All right, let's get this thing set up here. The horizontal cutter is turning at 370 RPM. Turning 550 RPM, taking 100 thousandths off the top. 3.6 inches per minute. Okay, here we go.
You're probably wondering why the cutters are spinning at different RPMs. The first reason is that it just looks cooler in slow motion. And secondly, it's impossible to get the vertical and the horizontal spindle to match speeds. And that's okay because face mills have a really wide operating RPM range. It's really fun watching these 2 cutters cut. Even though this probably doesn't have a real good practical application, it's entertaining and we're learning something. You're also going to notice that I had to turn my vise 90 degrees to make this cut. And this vise wasn't designed to be used this way. It's hard to access the handle. There's not a lot of good places to put the clamps in. Maybe a little bit in the future we can redesign a vise for this machine specifically.
Wow, 2 at once. That is a really nice surface finish on the back. All right, let's take a look at this block. We'll see how square we are. Wow, really pretty surface finish. 2 different speeds, kind of interesting. 2 different insert geometry. That is a razor blade, so let's knock that down. Right on the money. I wouldn't ask for anything better than that. Well guys, I had a ton of fun playing with these double face mill cutters on this machine. It's gonna be a perfect fit for me here in the shop. I still don't know what to do with the K&T milling machine, so please leave some comments down below. Give me some ideas what you think we should do with it. You're gonna see a lot more of this beast, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.
Don't forget to check out my new tools on the Fireball Tool website, like the giant hardtail vise, the scraper chipping hammer combo, and the popular hex key holders.